Welcome to Heart with Keisha B, the podcast that focuses on the journey of grief, healing, and overcoming unforeseen circumstances. Whether you're dealing with loss or life challenges, this is a podcast that you don't want to miss. I am your host, Keisha B. So take a deep breath, open your mind and your soul, and sit back as we embark on this journey together. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another week of Heart to Heart with Keisha B. As you all know, every week I come on here and I bring guests that not only share their story, but they also bring a moment of inspiration. And over the course of me having this podcast, I always have brought people on, some that I knew, some that I met, and some that will have a long lasting effect on my life. But this podcast today is special. It's special because it's not only somebody whom I know, but it's also somebody who I love. And that is my 15-year-old son. So today we have Jahari Barron, who is here with us to talk about what does grief, healing, and overcoming unforeseen circumstances look like in his life. And so Jahari, thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to come on your mom's podcast today to share your story. I know this may not be something that's easy, but as always, I've always told you how proud I am of you to be able to stand up and speak up on matters that may not always be comfortable, right? But it's put you in a position to where your voice can be heard, your words can be an inspiration to other people. So welcome to Heart with Keisha B. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you.
So Jahari, let me ask you this question. How hard was it for you to agree to be a guest today on this particular podcast?
It was kind of uncomfortable to me. I've talked about my father's death before, but never in front of a wide audience of people. So it's definitely a new experience for me, but I'm happy I'm here and I'm happy I'm able to share my experiences and maybe my point of view on it.
Thank you. Thank you for being brave. And again, being that I am your mother, I know that this is not an easy topic for you. So as always, I want to give you a hug. But this time I want to give you a virtual hug. I want to give you a virtual hug for just being brave enough to open up. And again, as I said before, I know this is not an easy topic for you as it is not for anyone else. But because I know you personally, I know that how this death has impacted your life. But I also know the maturity that has come from this. As your mother, I'm going to say I see that even sometimes if you don't feel that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So Jahari, as we begin Heart to Heart with Keisha B, this particular episode, tell us a little bit about yourself and why this topic is so important to you and why being on this podcast is so important to you today.
Well, not only in fourth grade did I lose my dad, but soon after that is when the pandemic started, which offered a whole bunch of other issues that came with it. So I'm able to share that perspective because I know a lot of people who have also gone through the same thing.
Let's talk about who your father was to you, right? Let's go backwards before the death of your father, right? Let's talk about who was your father and what did he mean to you in your growth and development?
Well, during my early life, or most of my life before he passed, he was really the one taking care of me. I spent a lot of time around him, and he was really a role model to me. Drove me to my football practices, games, stuff like that. So he was a very important figure in my life.
Yeah. You know, Jahari, as you talk about, driving you to and from different places and being the person who heavily took care of you, what I used to always say, and I'm sure you remember me saying this, I'll share this with the audience. I used to always say that you all were like Sanford and Son, right? So for the audience to give you all a view of what that means, if you've ever watched Sanford and Son, whenever you saw that blue truck pulling down the road, there was a father on one side and there was Jahari on the other side. And so again, that's just a little visual of when we talk about, or when Jahari talks about who he was and who his father was to him. So Jahari, tell us a little bit more about, the early parts of your life. I hear you talk about, that your dad was very impactful in your life and he drove you to and from different places and he took care of you, but sort of give people an idea of what did that look like for this little young boy who was growing up.
Not only was my father a role model to me, but he was also very caring. He was often funny at times. And I really enjoyed being around him, of course, because he was my dad. And two, I actually take after him a lot. So he kind of formed who I am today. So I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah. So when you say that, you're like him and he formed who you are today. Sort of tell me, what does that mean? I mean, of course, I'm your mom, right? And so I know some of these things, but share this with the audience. What exactly does that mean in regards to, your dad sort of formed who you are today? What are the characteristics that you think that are very similar to that of your father?
My father carried a very sort of seriousness around him, and I feel like I may have inherited that a bit. Not only that, but he was also known to be pretty caring, and I've heard people say that about me as well.
Yeah. I think, what I hear you saying is the seriousness, right? Sometimes people may see you like they saw your father and may say, what's wrong, right? How does that make you feel sometimes when people just look at your outer shell and they may think that something's wrong just based upon your demeanor, as I hear you say, is sort of what you gather from your dad?
It was pretty strange. It even happened like when I was pretty young. People told me that I looked angry or mad, or when I crossed my arms when I stood. It was pretty strange, but I was never really angry at anything. So it's kind of difficult to express emotion, of course, for me.
So as we talk a little bit about your childhood, before we go deeper into the subject matter today, tell me one memory that you really have of a young child with your father.
Well, my dad always used to take me fishing, so I have a lot of memories from that. I caught a lot of fish one day. I think I caught like 7 fish one day. It was a really fun day, and that's one of the memories I really hold with me from my dad.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, me knowing your father, I know that was a relaxing time for him. Like fishing was very relaxing for him, and being able to have that opportunity to share that moment with your dad, I'm sure is something, like you say, is that you hold on very deeply as you do all the other memories.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jahari, now we're going to get into a topic that I'm sure is very touchy. And again, I applaud you for opening up to be able to talk about this. And as you and I know, being able to communicate how you're feeling, as it may be uncomfortable, can also add a sense of relief as well to some degree. So you spoke about your dad passing when you were in 4th grade. Do you want to sort of tell us about that moment when you learned of your father's death and how that may have had an impact, or how it did have an impact on your life on that particular day?
So it was on December 31st. I was staying with my grandmother after Christmas. I woke up, I heard my grandmother crying. I ran in, seeing what was going on, and she told me that my father passed. The initial words didn't shock me as much. I've experienced death with other family members, but none of them as close as that. So I didn't really know how to react to those words. So pretty instantly, I kind of just walked back to the room, sat there for a bit, and after a few seconds, I just couldn't help but scream. It was really scary because I was just processing what that was going to mean, what I was going to have to go home to. And that initial moment, I don't think was the scariest part, but it was definitely a shift in my thinking or behavior.
So tell me a little bit about that, Jahari, when you say a shift in your thinking and behavior. What exactly, if you can recall back to that, what exactly does that mean? Or what did that mean then, if you can recall?
I think that moment was sort of where I started feeling maybe hopeless, thinking, oh, things may actually be different now. I think it was just a moment of fear for me.
I remember that moment, right? I remember coming to you, being that we were not at the same home at the time of you learning of your father's passing. And obviously, as you and I both know, the shock and the toll that it took on all family members that learned of the passing of your father. But I remember you asked me a question, and now it all comes together. Your question as a young 9-year-old kid, you looked at me, and I remember you asking me, Mommy, what happened? What's wrong? And I remember my words very vividly to you, that your dad was sick. And I remember asking you, did you know that your father was sick? And your words to me were, no, you didn't. So let's sort of talk about that. When you learned at that time that your father was sick, even though he had since passed, how did that feel to you just learning it then?
It was kind of scary because I remember once in a while before my father's passing, he always was complaining about being in pain or having a headache. And I thought those were normal occurrences. So when I learned that they were actually because he was sick, it was very scary, and I felt kind of dumb for not realizing it. And I couldn't help but feel kind of negligent to those things, or maybe that I should have noticed that in that moment. So maybe a bit of guilt I was feeling.
Okay. And would that be because y'all were so close and y'all were around each other so much? Is that maybe why some of those feelings of guilt or hopelessness may have come about?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was around him every single day. So the fact that I didn't catch on that he was sick, it made me feel pretty guilty about some things.
Okay. And how about today? Do you still carry some of those same feelings, or how were you able to work through maybe not feeling that way if you no longer feel that way? Or do you still feel that way, should I say?
I don't think I still feel that way. I think part of that guilt was just me being young, of course. Mm-hmm. But now, of course, I know that it wasn't my fault.
Okay.
There wasn't much that I could do about it.
Yeah, that's very powerful, Jahari. You know, one of the things I also remember after you learned that your father had been ill, you looked at me in a very innocent, very scared, and I'm going to use the words that you used, right? A very hopeless 9-year-old who was also confused, as I stated. And you looked at me and you said, "Mommy, are we going to be okay?" And I remember looking back at you and I remember saying to you, "Jahari, if we hold on to what okay used to feel like, we won't. But in order for us to begin to feel okay, we have to define what a new okay looks like for us." And so as a 9-year-old kid, if you can go back and think back to that time, how did those words resonate with you?
Well, when I asked the question, it was completely from a place of fear. It was a complete subversion of what I already had in my mind, that my dad was going to be here forever. He was always going to be beside me. Yes. So that answer, it was hard for me to accept at that point because I didn't really want to accept that things were going to have to be different. I didn't want a new okay. I wanted the okay that I had yesterday.
Yes, makes perfect sense. And thank you for being so transparent. And, you know, I want to share with people that are listening to this podcast that, you know, as I often say on all of my podcasts, is that this is a very raw, uncut, uncomfortable podcast. And I'm sure for our listeners, I want you all, I have to be very transparent with you all to say that this is not an easy podcast for myself as the host. But we as a family want to talk about the importance, as we are both grieving, as we're both healing, that it takes a collaboration. It takes being able to communicate openly about our feelings and maybe how one may have not understood the other person because we were dealing with our own stuff. And so we want to take this opportunity to really dive deep into what our real life looks like when we are grieving and as we are beginning to heal or have healed in some areas of our life. And so, Jahari, as we move forward into this conversation, tell us about what days look like as, you know, you return back to the home where myself and your dad lived and you and your siblings. Tell me if you can recall what that was like for you.
It felt very empty. I didn't want to go into the basement. I didn't want to sleep. I didn't want to sleep alone. It was pretty isolating. I think I just was feeling maybe alone, maybe scared that other people are going to go to, and overall just a terrible experience.
Yeah, which makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense because, again, like you said, before you left the house, going to your grandmother's home, the house was normal, right? It was our normal. It was what we were used to having. It's what became, you know, our day-to-day routine. And then to walk back into a door that I'm sure when you were walking back in, you were already hesitant because you knew life had shifted. So, Jahari, I know that, you know, after your father passed and you came home, that, again, it was right after the holiday, right? And so you had to return back to school. Tell me what that was like to return back to school after losing your father.
It was pretty jarring, you know, just trying to go back to normal life after that. I think I was enrolled in the after school program still. So I remember I kept forgetting things at school, having to run back to get them. It was overall just very disorienting. I was feeling pretty disorganized with all my stuff. Yeah, just pretty scrambled all over the place.
How is it walking back into the class? I know that after the passing of your father, that your classroom, your peers showered you with a lot of, you know, handwritten notes and different gifts from your teachers and so forth. But how was that for this 9-year-old kid to walk back into a classroom after the holiday, but his life was different than what it was before the holiday? How was that for you?
I'm thankful that no one really talked about it. I didn't really want anyone to talk about it. Everyone treated me pretty normally, so I'm really thankful for that. I'm just happy I didn't get a bunch of I'm so sorry for your loss, a bunch of that. I didn't need that or want that.
Right. Right. So how would you, I know that you're giving it from your perspective, right? As we're educating the public on what it looks like for a 9-year-old kid to encounter such a loss and have to go back into the school setting, like you say, that once was normal for you. What is the best way for one's peers and teachers to approach a child who's just lost a parent or lost a loved one?
I think the best approach is just to pay attention to what's going on. Because you can obviously tell when someone's just trying to get through with their day, go home. And I think that's how I was a lot of the days, just trying to get through the motions, go home, and not trying to deal with anyone talking to me. And I think if someone needs that you should definitely give them that. But if they are like obviously distressed or sad, you should definitely comfort them, no matter what the situation is, no matter if it's grief or just anything else going on.
Yeah. So Jahari, I know that, shortly after the passing of your father, I put you in counseling. And I know that may have been very uncomfortable, right? But I will be very transparent with our audience here, being that I too am was a child, should I say, who lost parents at a very young age. And I know that the hurt that it caused me over the course of my lifetime. Again, this was back in the 80s. And going to counseling wasn't something that was normal in African-American homes. So moving forward to 2018, 2019, placed in counseling. Tell me about that experience for you, again, having to process the death of your father.
Well, I think already a bit before my father passed, I was in counseling for a bit, going in and out. But this shift to like a weekly counseling, it was pretty different. But I'm glad I went, of course. I learned a lot of coping mechanisms that I could help to deal with it. I learned how to process all of my emotions. I learned that feeling numb at times is okay, which I just realized that I may have been feeling a lot of the time.
Do you think seeking therapeutic services after losing a loved one is very beneficial, regardless of what your age may be?
I think everyone should be in counseling, but especially for people in grief, it can really help if you're feeling confused or lost or about your emotions, about how you go on.
Was there ever a point during that counseling session? Because as I heard you say, like you went to counseling before, but grief counseling was a little bit different. Was there ever a point throughout the counseling session that it became so uncomfortable that you just didn't want to return back?
I was lucky to have a really good therapist. So I didn't really ever feel too uncomfortable to like not want to talk. But there are definitely times where I've gotten choked up, not know what to say, and have to like stop talking for a second because I don't know how to articulate my words.
What do you think life would have looked like for you shortly thereafter of losing your father if you didn't have those additional tools? I mean, granted, yes, you have mom, right? But being able to have someone extra in your life that's neutral, what do you think life could have been like if you did not have the extra layer of support for you?
Or I say it would be harder for me to express my emotions, express how I'm feeling at the moment, and understand my emotions. So I'd be feeling very confused about everything. I feel like I shut myself out almost.
The reason I asked that is because, I don't know the statistics as far as the number, right? But I know that it's very common that when children are facing grief and there's loss in the home, that many times children don't like to come to their parent to talk about it because of several different things, right? It may be that that child may feel like that they're bothersome to their parent because they may be thinking, well, my mom or my dad are grieving too, right? My mom or my dad may be distanced because of. And so was there ever a time that even though you may have been in counseling, that you felt that you could not come to me as your mom to talk about what you may have been going through emotionally?
I always knew there were certain things I'd come to you with, like generally feeling sad, but I also knew that I didn't want to bombard you with feeling grief because I knew you're going through the same grief that I was. So I didn't want to bombard you with the same emotions. I didn't want to like just have a feedback loop of both of us sharing how sad we're feeling.
Right. So let me ask you a question. All right. And I want you to be very transparent because, again, it's not about us being mother. We are mother and son, but I want you to feel comfortable to answer this question. Is there anything that I could have given you more than I did during that time? Even though you may have said I didn't come to you because I thought I would have bothered you because you were grieving too. Is there anything that you felt that you needed more of from me during that time?
I think I'm pretty happy with how I handled my grieving process. And I think you did great too. So I don't think there's anything you could have given me more than what you already have.
Well, thank you. So for the audience, right, if we have a mother or a father that's listening or a child, share with the audience what you feel like a kid may need from their parent during this time.
These are two conflicting ideas, but space and attention are both important. Because without space, the child can feel maybe even more closed up, not willing to share their opinions or how they're feeling on a subject. But maybe with a not enough, they won't have anyone and they'll feel alone and want to shut out more. So there's a perfectly healthy medium between giving your child some space to process and also checking in on them to see how the process is going.
Mm-hmm. I like how you was able to tie the two together, right? Giving you just enough, but not giving you too much to show that, hey, we're still here for each other, but we're respecting each other's space. We're respecting each other's process. But there's that conscious mind that know that I can go with my mom, talk to my mom, or my mom's going to come talk to me when it's necessary. Is that sort of what I hear you saying in reference to the space and too much and not enough?
Mm-hmm. And it's especially important because growing up, like transitioning into a teen, hormones and stuff are going on. They're going to naturally want to be more shut out from their parents. And it's honestly scary. So that window becomes smaller. And I think all parents need to know that your child is trying, honestly.
Mm-hmm. So you touch on a point and you say trying, right? And I heard you say early on in the podcast that life was sort of different for you after losing your father, because then after that, there's something that sort of shook up the whole world. And that was the pandemic, right? Something that we had not prepared for, something that we didn't know what to do to prepare for. Let's talk about how the pandemic could have had an impact on your grief, being that you had to end fifth grade early in regards to going into the classroom setting with your peers.
The first few weeks, it was pretty fine. You know, breaks off of school, I was pretty hopeful that we were gonna have to go back soon. But as the weeks went on, I started to feel shut out. I felt disconnected from the rest of the world. It was almost adding on to the fear I was feeling and the confusion. Especially when I was talking about that feedback loop of bouncing off of each other. We were both going through grief at that moment, and we were in the same vicinity for so long. It's hard not to feel even more sad about that. But the pandemic was just horrible for, I think, almost everyone's mental state. It provided a whole new sense of loneliness to everyone. So it was not helpful for my grieving process, especially because I was feeling really lost and lonely at that point.
Right. You know, I remember as we move forward into the pandemic, right? You're now going on to middle school, and we already know what that's like, right? A teenager going from elementary to middle school, regardless of pandemic or not, that's a shift, right? Yeah. Because you're now the for the lack of a better word, you're the little man on totem pole, right? You go in, if you're walking into the building, you're already feeling a little bit intimidated because here's these eighth graders that look like grown men or grown women, but you didn't have the opportunity to actually walk into the door. Right. You started your sixth grade year at a kitchen table. And so you talk about how it increased your grief process and your sense of loneliness. And I remember, right, I remember our relationship began to change. You know, I became more aggravated with you. You became more aggravated with me. And it could have been a matter, like you said, a matter of grief and just a new norm that we wasn't ready for. So you want to sort of talk about what did that look like for you when you look at the relationship that you and I had during the time before you went back into the actual school building?
I felt very alone at that time, that I couldn't go to anyone. I think it was just on both parties, a lack of understanding. And that's why I want to tie it back to that, what I said, that everyone's trying. During this time, everyone was just trying to get by. Everyone was just trying to get to the next day. So it's very hard to think about what other people are feeling. And it's easy to misconstrue the little things they do as malicious intent. So yeah, that can form in the little things like not taking out the trash, not cleaning things up, or, you know, just saying one little thing that makes someone feel like, oh, you're on my case. It pushes you almost into a corner.
And again, I want to say thank you for being transparent. I know that you and I have had small conversations about this, but I believe as parents, sometimes we have to acknowledge our flaws, and we have to be able to look at our children and say, I'm sorry. Right. And so even though it may have been things that we may have not been able to control in regards to the pandemic and so forth, I want to openly say to you that I'm sorry. Right. I'm sorry for moments that I did not understand what you were going through. I'm sorry for moments that I may have made you feel that you weren't good enough, or that you were purposefully not doing what I expected you to do. Right. And one thing that I do remember very vividly was academics, knowing that here you were, a kid who always made A's and very seldomly made B's, but middle school, outside of just being middle school, there's the pandemic and there's grief. And then there's mom, right? With all these expectations of, I don't understand why you're not turning in your work. I don't understand why you're not making A's. I don't understand why you're making C's. I don't understand why you're making F's. Let's talk about that, right? Let's talk about the pressure that I, as a mom, may have placed upon you during that time, as you said, because of his uncertainty.
Well, one, I was transitioning I'm elementary school to middle school. That's obviously a big gap, an increase in work, an increase of expectations, of course. So one, the big shift in, I have to get to work now. It's a big shift. It's like coming off of summer, but amplified a lot. And during this time, it's just so hard to have the energy to do things, because a lot of time it's just a risk. You either, you can do your work, do everything you need to do that moment, but in that you risk your mental health. You risk feeling energized, being able to do other things of the day. You risk your happiness. So I feel like every day it was kind of like a battle between me if I should relax and almost try to heal myself what was going on, because I feel like I was maybe seconds away from having a breakdown if I had to do another bit of work. And sometimes it felt like everyone thought I was doing it because I wanted to be lazy. I didn't want to be lazy. I like getting good grades. I enjoyed getting all A's. And it was hard for me as well, not getting all A's. Very scary. I thought I was, am I getting dumber by being in here? So it was also a matter of, is this my environment or is this me? So it was definitely scary. I was adding to the confusion I was talking about earlier. I didn't know what's going on with me. I didn't know what's going on with my grades. I didn't know what was going on with my mom. She seemed like angry at me, and I didn't understand why.
Right. I remember a conversation, and this was the conversation. You looked at me one day, because again, as I alluded to, and as you just alluded to, mom was tough, right? Because all mom knew was to be mom. And grades and making good grades was very imperative for our home. So I remember very vividly that one day you looked at me, because again, as mom, I had all these expectations. I had all of these thoughts of what Jahari had always done. Jahari had always made A's. And so I remember looking at you one day, and you said to me, because I was fussing, and you said, Mom, you're worried about my grades, and I'm worried about my mental health. And I must say, it completely caught me off guard, because what it taught me was, as a parent, sometimes we have to listen to our kids, and we don't always have all the answers. Because what I've always said to myself, whether I openly say it to my kids or not, is that your children teach you how to be parents, because every child's different. Right. And so I want to thank you for teaching me something on that day by letting me know that even though I may have seen that there were some things I should have been concerned about of your mental health, I was more so focused on what I had always been accustomed to, and that was your grades. So let's talk about that. Do you remember that day?
I do. It was a very stressful day for me. It felt like almost every week we were arguing about something. And I think it was mostly because, we were in the house together. Yeah, everyone's going to get sick of each other someday. Yeah, so it was very scary seeing my mom almost act like she didn't care about what I was going through.
And again, this is my moment to tell you I'm sorry. As we have spoke about, some changes that you had endured with the loss of your father, the pandemic, adjusting to that, adjusting to behaviors of your mom that you had never seen before, there came another moment in your life that an adjustment occurred. Do you mind talking about that?
So this was one of the first times I had immediate family be in the hospital for something very serious. And because of this, I didn't really have the ability or the perspective to grasp how serious it was. So I kind of, put it in the back of my head like, oh, okay. And I just kept moving because I was still experiencing grief and going into a new school, just trying to keep my grades up, stuff like that. I was in around 6th grade. I think this is when I went back to school that I learned of this. He was in and out of the hospital. Sometimes I saw him, sometimes I didn't. And I remember sometimes like he looked sickly almost. And it was kind of scary the moment I saw it. But I tried to, keep it in the back of my mind, stop thinking about it, stuff like that. Because and really, I didn't believe my brother would die. I didn't believe it. I didn't think it was something that could have happened. So in 2021, October, when it did happen, I learned it after coming back from a trip with my cousins. I was pretty numb up to that point because they brought me into the basement, told me what happened. And I was like, oh, okay. I was just trying to get through the day again. So none of the actual hurt hit me up until right till the end of the funeral. Everything was going fine. I was sitting through the funeral. I was doing fine. But it came to the end of the funeral when they closed the casket. And as soon as they closed the casket, I think that's where it was like, oh, this is different again. And I think that's where I broke down. I started crying. I just couldn't take it anymore. All the stuff that I was holding in, all the stuff that I was holding in the back of my mind finally coming to the front so I could think about it.
Was it, being that it was shortly 2 years, a little bit over 2 years from losing your father to now losing your brother, do you feel like that intensified your grief because it was two close people to you?
Of course, because I remember when I was having that breakdown, I was just thinking, oh, another thing that I had to deal with. I was just pretty sick of it, fed up that I couldn't do anything about it.
So I hear you say that you couldn't do anything about it. Was there any point that, again, you may have mentally taken on some ownership?
I don't think I took responsibility as much as I did as the last one. Much. I think I was just feeling angry at the world for this one.
Wow. So that's deep. If you don't mind, let's sort of talk about that when you say that you felt angry with the world, because I think that what you're saying is, even though you may have been a teenager, right, that statement rings pretty true for many people when they encounter death. So if you don't mind sharing, what did that mean for Jahari when Jahari said he sort of felt angry at the world?
So this death impacted me because during my father's death, I was feeling young. So the initial reactions were fear and feeling scared. But now I've already gone past that. So the new emotion I was feeling now was anger. Why me? Why is this happening to happen to me? Why can't I change the outcome of these things? I was angry at the world because I couldn't control it. So this loss of control after I felt like I just regained balance. It's like falling all over again, having to start all over. I was really angry about it. And I just felt like I felt powerless in that moment. I felt really powerless. When my father died, I didn't feel that powerless. I just felt really confused and lost.
Mm-hmm. You think a lot of it had to do with age? I think I heard you say.
Yeah.
That you were 9 and then, you were much older when not much older, but you were older when your brother passed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you look at yourself today, we're almost 4 years out from your brother's passing. Who is Jahari today?
I think he's someone who's gone through a lot and has come out a different person, a more mature person because of these experiences. I think these experiences have given me the tools to grow, as well as the lessons I need to know in growing. Lessons like when I am lost, I know better how to recuperate myself, what I need to do, the steps I need to take to find my new normal. And I also learned that it's not going to get easier. I'm not going to stop falling, but I know that I need to get up quicker next time. Mm-hmm. I know how to get up quicker next time.
Do you currently have any coping skills that you utilize to help you that has helped you get to where you are now mentally and emotionally?
Oh, I love playing instruments. I've always loved playing instruments. That's my dad got me into playing guitar. I play saxophone now in my band. So these hobbies really help me. It helps me express how I feel. It's also just really fun for me. I also run track. That's great. Physical activity is great for coping with stress, coping with grief, stuff like that. So yeah, I think these tools are instrumental to healing.
So you brought up something, Jahari. I didn't mention this early on in the podcast. You brought up the fact of you playing guitar, right? You said that's what you and your dad used to do. So when you reflect back on activities that you and your father used to do, How hard was it to pick back up to do some of those things after the loss of your dad?
I remember, I think, was it maybe like a couple months after my dad passed, I said, I want to quit guitar. I felt like a complete loss of interest after my dad passed. Like I didn't want to do this anymore. I felt like there was no reason to do it. I'm glad I didn't though. I'm so thankful I didn't. I love the skills that I harbored because of that. I like that. It's a kind of safekeeping as my dad's, a hobby I carry with me at all times.
Mm-hmm. And because I am your mother, I know that you hold his guitar very close to you. Mm-hmm. And I know that you continue to use his guitar whenever you would attend your guitar lessons. Tell me about the feeling that may have given you to know that you were able to have a keepsake of your father's and still be able to utilize that in something that you love so dearly, and that's playing music.
Yeah, keepsakes are really important. They for me, it helped me feel like, oh, my dad's still here, right? There's still pieces of him laying around. I just need to find them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know that, I often laugh because I remember when your father was living and, the two of you one person was downstairs playing the guitar and the other person's upstairs playing the guitar. But there was moments that you just didn't want to practice. Right. And he'd be like, Jahari, you have to do this every day for 30 minutes out of a day. Was that pressure?
It really wasn't as much pressure as I was making it. It was just him wanting me to be better. And he knew the talent that I had in playing guitar. So I'm really thankful he did that, because now it's something I want. It's something I want to do instead of something I feel like I have to do. So it's become less of a chore and more of just a hobby that I enjoy doing. So I'm happy he did that.
I asked that question because now I've never shared this with you, but I love when I'm just walking through the house or I'm just in my bedroom and I hear you picking at your guitar, right? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, like you just said, no one is actually telling Jahari to pick up his guitar. He's just doing it. He's just doing it because he loves it. He's doing it because he may be in a moment to where he need that extra, right? Like maybe it's your coping mechanism for that moment, right? So as we know, art within itself is therapy, right? And so has that become sort of your form of therapy in some sense?
Yeah, music is definitely my form of therapy. Playing in a band, learning new songs. Every time I learn a new song, I feel like it's another little push for me. It feels like someone's cheering me on every time I do it. Especially because I'm using my father's guitar. I feel like someone's cheering me on every time I use it. But yeah, it's a great hobby for me. It's a great outlet.
Mm-hmm. I want to take a step back for a second. And I don't mean to jump in the midst of the story, but I remember you used to play football and Dad used to be on the sidelines and he was tough, right? Mom was tough on academics in some regards, but Dad was tough in football. But tell me about those moments where I may be perceiving Dad was tough in football, but tell me, what did that do for you and your confidence when you were out there playing football?
It formed the image that I kept of my dad, a coach in some ways, like a coach, someone on the sidelines, always watching me, always cheering me on, someone always willing to help. So I'm also glad he did that, always cheering me on through whatever I pursued. It doesn't matter, whatever I pursued, he was always there on the sidelines cheering me on.
Do you carry those memories with you when you were in tough situations and you just need that extra push, or that, as they say, sometimes you had that little extra person on your shoulder? Do you ever hear his voice in moments where you may need that extra push? And Mom may not be there, right? Mom may not know that Jahari needs that extra push, whether it's because I didn't ask, or maybe I wasn't paying attention, or maybe Mom was embedded in doing some other things that Mom was doing. Do you ever still have that extra push on your shoulder, that being your father's voice?
Oh yeah, it's definitely, it actually feels like maybe like a physical push forwards. And when I'm feeling maybe hesitant to do some stuff, he'll be like push me forward, tell him, come on, go. You're too far now, you can't quit. I'm really thankful for that.
So all those times that he was on the sideline and, he was giving you some motivation or giving you some techniques, or, what I remember very vividly, again, I use that word quite often, was you always looked up in the stand for his approval. Do you still find yourself needing that sense of approval?
I don't think I need that sense of approval now. I don't think I need it at all, actually. But I definitely still think, what my dad say right now, would he be proud of me when I did this? So it feels like sometimes, he still is in the stands watching me.
Yeah, that's special. That's very, very special memory to be able to have with you, like I say, that extra voice, because we all have down moments, right? We all have moments where we doubt ourselves. We all have moments where we're down and we just don't know if we're going to be able to push forward. So to be able to have something that you can carry with you, right? That even though we know grief is something that can resurface at any given time. What I often say on all my podcasts, Jahari, is that grief and healing coexist, right? And that you can still have some sense of joy in your life. May not be the joy that you would have had there not been tragedy, but you could still have some joy and still carry some of those same tools with you that was placed in your life as a young kid. And I'm sure that makes you feel great to be able to have those things.
Yeah, of course.
So Jahari, as we are trudging along through today's podcast, I want to ask you, if you can give advice to another young person who is struggling with grief, what would that be?
Don't expect anything. Especially when I was going to therapy, I was hearing about other people's grieving processes, hearing how they helped with it, hearing what they felt, hearing their coping mechanisms. I just want to say, don't expect anything. Don't expect your grieving process to be like anyone else's. But it's also important to carry those things with you. You can have things similar to them, but don't expect your grieving process to have exact things from other people's. Also, don't expect it to take as long as a time, because you're never gonna know how long it's gonna last. You could be grieving for years. You can be grieving for your whole life, even.
Mm-hmm. Are there any type of memories that you carry with you, or are there any things that you do in honor of your dad and or your brother since their passing?
I think I carry their memories and their legacy in the form of hobbies. My brother also did track, so that's where I kind of channel him in that respect, because I know he'd be right there cheering me, telling me to run faster. So all of my hobbies, I try to dedicate them to the people who would have been cheering me on those sidelines, hoping that I go a bit farther, do a bit more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Then your brother was a little bit tough on you as well.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes I'm sure he get on your nerves too, though. Now I know he get on your nerves because he get on everybody's nerves, right? And so let's want to talk about that as we are getting closer to the end of the podcast. You talk about the memories and talked about your brother, cheering you on, and that it was his desire or love for track that has increased your desire and love for track. How would you describe your relationship with your brother?
My brother is tough, especially when I was growing up. Always us fighting or something. But as we grew up, in the short time I knew him as an adult, like a full-grown adult, I realized that he really wants the best for me. He really wanted me to succeed in life. He would love to see me winning things. He would show up to my games, on my track meets. He would love me to win. He wants me to do more. And that was a new side to it. It was kind of a new perspective to him, especially as I was maturing into a teenager. I was seeing a new side of him. I just saw him as, my older brother, but I saw him as a supporter of me.
Now, did you see him being more supporter after the passing of your father? Is that when you recognized that maybe he stepped up to be more of a supporter than just a big brother?
Yeah, definitely.
So as your mother, what can I do more for you?
I think this goes out to all parents. Just, as I said again, just understand 100% of the time that your child is just trying to do their best. Mm-hmm. They don't want to do bad. They don't want to give up. Everyone's trying their best. That's something I try to carry with me when I think someone may be doing something wrong. I try to understand that they're not doing it out of malicious intent. They're just trying to get by in their day.
And so I want to share this with parents. Thank you, Jahari, for sharing from your perspective. And what I want to share with parents is that it's important for us to share our emotions with our children, right? It's important, there's many days that I did not let you see me cry because I didn't want you to see me cry sometimes. But I understand the importance that you should see me cry, right? Because you being able to see me cry lets you know that this is normal, right? That this is part of the process. I don't have anything to hide from you because these feelings are real, right? I miss your father. I miss your brother. And so I share this with our audience because far too often we as parents, we always want to place ourselves in a superhero role, that we can handle everything, we can take care of everything, and that everything is good. Well, let's be real. The loss of losing a loved one hurts, right? It shakes you to your core. And so it's important for parents like myself and for other parents to show your children or your child, for instance, my son, Jahari, that grief hurts. It's important for me as a mother to show you that I too must work through my grief, right? That it's important for me to be there for you. It's important for me to have my shoulder ready for you whenever you need to cry, regardless of what I'm going through as well. But it's also just as important for me to be able to process my feelings and let you see that and let you know that, and not try to put on this face like everything is okay. Because when I know that there's times I try to do that, and then ultimately my behaviors may have said different, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. And I think I want to bounce off what you're saying. It's especially important to let your kids know that you're human too. Because when both people are going through a grieving process, they don't want they don't want a superhero to come save them. They don't want any of that. They want a human to talk about their feelings with. They want someone who understands what they're going through. Because if you don't, if you just maintain your image as a superhero, maybe even like an idol in some sorts, your child's gonna feel lonely. They're gonna feel like, oh, they won't relate to this because they're perfect. Their mom, their dad.
Thank you for that. Thank you for adding on from your perspective of, I don't need my superhero mom, right? I just need my mom who's grieving. That's what I need. I think that's what I heard you say. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So Jahari, as we are, as I said before, getting closer, like, this topic can go on and on and on, all right? Because it's something that's very authentic for you and I both, as we are both walking through this healing process. How are anniversary dates for you?
I know it's different for other people, but I find it hard to feel any pain or suffering on anniversary days. I know that can be hard for different people, but I don't often find myself feeling hurt or maybe heavily impacted by it. There's definitely some recognition there. Like, oh, right, that's the day that this happened. I remember the next year, 2019, the year after my father's death on December 31st, I was kind of scared to stay at my grandmother's house because I was like, what if it happens again? So I was a bit apprehensive of that. But past that, I don't think I ever felt any fear or maybe grieving over some anniversary dates.
I always ask my guests, what is one heart-to-heart message that you would leave with our listeners today?
I said it before, I'll say it again. I think it's like maybe a moral of the story that I carry with myself. And I think you should carry with you too. Remember that everyone's trying. Everyone's trying to support you. Everyone's trying to maybe get to the next day. Everyone's trying to go through the same process of healing. And remember that you're trying to. I know sometimes it feels like, oh, I can't do this. Maybe I am just lazy. Maybe I am just dumb or something. Don't feel like, because just understand that you're trying. You're also trying. You're going through things too. And you should keep trying,
So, Jahari, as you have given your heart-to-heart message to the listeners from a child's perspective and now teenager's perspective, I want to give my heart-to-heart message to our listeners as well. My words from my heart to yours is, as a parent, remember, you don't have to be a superhero. Remember that as you and your child are both encountering a new, that the two of you or the three of you, how many ever you may have in your home, each of you need each other. And so during this time that life has shifted, during this time that there's a sense of confusion, a sense of fear, a sense of frustration, a sense of anger, shock, trying to get to a point of acceptance, as I've mentioned, all of the stages of grief, give yourself grace. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with your children. Be patient with your loved ones. Be patient with the process of grief and the process of healing. As I always say, that grief doesn't have a timeline. It can happen in any given moment. But grief and healing both can coexist. So as you and your children are navigating this space, please be mindful that no one in this picture is a superhero. Wrap your capes around each other, which is your arms. Love on each other, maybe more than what you've loved on each other before. If there's a moment in your life thereafter that you must say that you're sorry for your kid because you may have slipped up and not done certain things, it's imperative that you acknowledge that. So I close this episode by saying this. Jahari, I'm very proud of you. Jahari, I see your growth. I know that great things are in store for you. Continue to hold on to your memories. Continue to hold on to your experiences. And know that regardless of what you may face in life, you will continue to be successful. This comes from your mother, from mother to son. I love you.
Thank you.
And so to our audience, we would like to say thank you for listening to Heart to Heart with Keisha B. Again, you can find us on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Pandora, and iHeartRadio. Have a great day. Thank you for tuning in to Heart with Keisha B. Remember, grief may shape our journey, but it doesn't define who we are. Healing is not a straight path, but with every step forward, you're creating space for hope, strength, and new beginnings. If today's episode brought you comfort or clarity, share it with someone who might need it too. Let's continue building this community of compassion and resilience together. Until next time, take care of your heart, your mind, and your soul. Honor your journey and always know that brighter days are ahead. I am Keisha B, and this has been Heart to Heart.